2/3 of tonight, Ooh, it's on. That was. Yeah, they're all pulled up.
Becky?
Come on, it's been 6 months since I've done that. Nothing?
Better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry.
Actually, I know. That's what makes it so
Including you
funny.
because you took a hiatus.
On both of them?
Okay, yeah, okay. Hi.
Nope.
This evening's Wednesday, July the 28th, Planning Commission to order. Before we do our roll call, I wanted to introduce our new Planning Commission members, Jason Stewart and Rich Delcor. So thank you for joining us. So Darby, if you will, the roll call.
When I call your name, please state here or present for the record. Kathleen Duncan.
Present.
Rich Delcor.
Present.
Matthew Yost.
Here.
Jason Stewart.
Here.
Charlie Wetmore.
Here.
Jackson Gilmore.
Here.
Ronald Williams.
Here.
Thank you.
So we are going to move on to the adoption of the agenda, but I do know that we have an amendment. Kevin?
Yes, ma'am. We neglected to put on election of the vice chair. With Mr. Hennick leaving us at the last meeting, we do need to fill that void. I'd ask that as you adopt the agenda that you add an addition for election of officers after the adoption of minutes. And then at that point, we can do the election.
Adoption of the agenda with
Yes, so I move we adopt the agenda with the amendment of adding an item 4B to nominate and elect a vice chair.
second.
Wait a minute, one clarification. Should we also, well, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Never mind.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So then can we get an adoption of the minutes from June the 23rd?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second, even though he's not.
No, it would need to be someone that was at the meeting.
Second.
There you go.
Ron seconds. All in favor?
We have
Aye.
discussion for a quick
Or,
second.
I'm sorry, discussion.
On the minutes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. On page 4, under the item 3, Unified Development Ordinance edits, I made the motion. I just wanted to clarify that I had requested clarification to sign face area and sign area. Words. It's just that I approved it and it didn't make those.
We did update that in the project as it moves forward to town council, so we'll make sure, we've got the clarification on there,
Okay.
but we'll make sure that the minutes reflect that.
I have a discussion item to add too. Under the Yale Apartments, I recused myself for that project, and I'm under there voting yes. And I think for parcel 7A, Kathleen also recused herself, and she's also on there as a voter.
You missed one.
I did.
I'm sorry, Matt, what was which item
Parcel
did you,
7A.
did you recuse yourself for?
Oh, I recused myself for item 1, the L Apartments.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Those corrections, do I, all in favor?
I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
I saw a face happening out there.
Okay, now we're going to go to the election of the officer of vice chair. Do I have any nominations? Can I nominate? I'll make a nomination for Charlie Whitmore.
Second.
Discussion? Ron, anything? Matt, good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Favor? Aye.
Aye.
Why does everyone look relieved?
Congratulations. Charlie, you are now the vice chair.
Okay, now the other point comes up. Because I was the at-large on the DRC, we need to fill that.
Okay, so now we need at large, or was that volunteer?
Yes, we do.
before?
I'm sorry?
Was that a volunteered thing before, or was that a?
Whomever
Who
wants
wants
to,
I truly think, in talking to a couple of people, that it would be good to have like a landscape architect like Kathleen or Matt or somebody like
You can take it if you want, Kathleen.
So then we need a second on the nomination for Kathleen.
Second.
All those in, discussion. Favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we get to public comments. For those who have comments pertaining to an agenda item before the board this evening, you will have the opportunity to comment before the board votes on the item. You're welcome to hold your comments until then or voice your comment at this time. Have any public comments? Have any old business? On to new business. 101 Windrush Lane. A request by Andrew Jacobs of the Miller Electric Company on behalf of the owner, Bank of America, for approval of a certificate of Appropriateness-HCO. The project consists of improvements to the exterior lighting for the site. The property is zoned general mixed use and identified by the tax map number in your packet, located to the southeast of Baylor Drive and US Highway 278, Forwarding Island Road. Katie. Sorry, thank you.
okay?
So we can,
My suggestion is we can wait and
want to wait
the
and see.
applicant shows up, yeah.
Okay, so do we need to vote to move it down on the agenda? Or how does that work?
Yes, we would.
A motion to move agenda item 1, let's say after agenda item 3. New business, number 3, is that okay?
that. So moved.
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we'll go to number 2, 6 Arley Way, a preliminary development plan. A request by Siegel Investments for the approval of a preliminary development plan. The project consists of the construction of a 13,736 square foot medical office building and associated infrastructure in Westbury Park. The property is zoned general mixed use and consists of 2 acres.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, I gotta recuse myself.
Kathleen is recusing herself.
So as Amanda said, this is for preliminary development plan for property at 6 Arley Way. When I show you this site, most of you will be familiar, all but 2 of you should be familiar with this because you actually approved this plan, well, you approved a plan for this parcel in January. Since January, they've actually had a change of use, which required a different footprint for the building and the site layout for parking. And it changed enough that we felt they needed to submit a new plan and bring it back to Planning Commission for review and approval. So just to refamiliarize you, this is the project site here off of Arley Way. This is the Westbury Park development that it backs up to. And it's part of an existing, the parcel, although undeveloped now, is part of the existing Westbury Park commercial area that was planned and began construction under Beaufort County purview and then was later annexed into the town of Bluffton. So here is the site plan for the lot. This is for an ambulatory surgery center. So they've provided a ambulance access drop-off lane, if you will, up top here. Parking in the rear. And they're still maintaining, there's still a very heavily vegetated berm that separates the property from the Westbury Park residential use. Included also the landscape plan. This is conceptual, but although it is pretty detailed, they did provide a plant schedule. Although you're not technically reviewing the landscape plan at the preliminary stage of the process, we like to provide it for you to show that they have every intent and are going to meet the landscape requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance. This does fall under the Unified Development Ordinance, I'm sorry, as this is zoned general mixed use. They have providing some adjacent use buffering, if you will, up top. I believe these, if memory serves, are Dahoon hollies and some viburnum odorantissum back here. Same thing on the other side, live oaks in the parking lot. And then foundation plantings all around. Already covered where this lies. Again, we originally, the date here for December 9th, that was the original TRC review, but we actually just provided comments for this back in the first week of July. And the DRC approved the plan without comment. As you're familiar, there are 6 separate criteria for which you would review and approve the plan. I can go through each individually if needed, but they were all included in your packet. Your action tonight, you have the authority to approve this application as it was submitted by the applicant, approve it with conditions. You could table the application and request more information or deny the application as it was submitted. Staff recommends that the preliminary application be approved as submitted. I can answer any questions. We also have the property owner and engineer record are here if you have any questions.
Anything you guys would like to say regarding the project? It's pretty.
I just have one, and I'm sure it's foregone, but I want to ask it anyways. Access from the adjacent properties that are already developed, there's no problems with that?
No, it's already in place. This slide actually doesn't show it, but if I go back to the satellite, you can see actually this parking that like abuts it has already been constructed. They would have to just pull their driveway from here. There's already a curb cut, from the adjacent property over here that I think. Your office over here? You own this adjacent property? Yeah. So the applicant owner actually owns the adjacent property as well. So all the access, all the infrastructure's all in place.
And no negative feedback from adjacent property owners? I mean, obviously he wouldn't against himself, but I'm talking
Like
in
Westbury
Park.
No, and again, like I said, this was actually a preliminary plan for a 12,000 square foot building, and parking was actually already approved in January. It's just that since they had to kind of rotate their building and reconfigure their parking, it was enough of a change that it required a new plan.
Wasn't it a service yard in the back originally, and now it's not?
Yeah, there was. It was kind of like a lay-down yard, maybe some parking of fleet vehicles, if I remember.
I have one question. I know it's not something we vote on or we can use as part of our vote, but you said it was now ambulatory, like what kind of, is it?
Ambulatory surgery center?
So it wouldn't have, like you said, for ambulances drop off, but it wouldn't be like sirens or anything. It's just a transport, like a transport.
You want to speak to that, Jen?
I'm just thinking of Westbury Park and the neighboring residential, so I just wanted to clarify.
Joe Fraser from CALLIII Investments. It's
a little
actually
more.
a ENT allergy clinic in the ambulatory surgery center. But it's basically an outpatient surgery, so it would not have ambulances and sirens and things like that coming.
I just want that on the record to make sure.
One other clarification, just on access, this parcel will also have an ingress, egress, and drainage easement across the drive coming in from the other side. So there'll be access, legal access from both sides.
Okay, thank you. A motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Going to move on to 6 Arley Way for a preliminary development plan.
That
I'm
was
sorry.
That was 6.
Old Carolina. Next, Old Carolina PUD Comprehensive Plan Amendment. The applicant is requesting approval of an amendment to the Town of Bluffton Comprehensive Plan to amend the future land use map for the subject parcel to change the future land use from medium density to high density residential. The 15.52 parcel is identified by the tax map number in your packet. And Kevin will tell us all about it. Kathleen, do you need to recuse?
I need to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't you have to do that from up here?
You need to come up and step down.
No.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. As you stated, this is a workshop, so there is no vote on this item. It's for discussion purposes. What I'd like to do is kind of run through my presentation very briefly, and then bring the applicant up, and then allow for an opportunity for a discussion. And then we can go back through any of the specific slides. And then if you have any questions about anything, they'll be up here to be able to answer them. And then from there, we'll just discuss the next steps. So as stated, this is the request by the applicant, J.K. Tiller and Associates, on behalf of the BRG Bluffton. This is for requesting an approval of an amendment to the Town of Bluffton Comprehensive Plan and zoning map. So this evening, we're focused on the comprehensive plan and the zoning map, and then I'll get into more detail on the other items that we have. As you stated, it's the 15.52 acres. It's located in the southwest corner of the intersection of Buck Island Road and Bluffton Parkway. So some background information. The applicant is proposing the development of a multifamily apartment community consisting of 188 residential apartments, the associated parking, infrastructure, and amenities. Consists of 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments ranging in between 754 and 1416 square feet in size. Approximately, there's 5 3-story apartment buildings with anticipated with a final site design and layout, which is yet to be completed. And then from a part of the application process, there is a master plan amendment associated with this, and that did receive comments from the Development Review Committee at the July 7th meeting, and those comments were provided to you in the packet. Just real quickly, this is a schematic of the site plan, and I've got some aerials here to assist you with you. Buck Island Road is here, Bluffton Parkway, arches around the site, and you can see the various buildings, there are 2 larger ones here, and then 3 smaller in the interior. This is an image, conceptual image of the master plan. Again, this is going into the Old Carolina PUD. While it's rather small, and I'm trying to zoom in on it here, this area right here represents where the applicant is requesting to be included into the Old Carolina PUD. So as I stated, there's concurrent applications with this request. So we have a comprehensive plan amendment, and that's to amend the future land use map of the comprehensive plan to change that use from medium density residential to high density residential. There's an associated zoning map amendment, so that's to change the official zoning map from the residential general, which is regulated by the Unified Development Ordinance, to the Old Carolina Planned Unit Development. There is a PUD text amendment for the Old Carolina PUD document, and that's to amend the section that's listed on the screen of what was the Bluffton zoning ordinances, but is associated with the PUD document, so bear with me here. And that's to increase the number of dwelling units per multifamily building, which is currently allowed at 20 units per building to 86 units per building. That also requests to amend the parking requirements from the 2 spaces per 1 and 2 bedroom units, and then 2.5 spaces for 3 bedroom units to allow for an overall 1.92 spaces per unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms. And then the master plan amendment, which is to amend the Old Carolina PUD master plan to include this parcel into that PUD as a new planning tract. Now, a little additional background information. Old Carolina does not have a development agreement associated with it. Similar to Palmetto Bluff, the Buckwalter Tract, Jones Estate, all have development agreements that have the associated dwelling units, acreage that's associated with it. So this is a PUD that does not have that development agreement. So we don't have to go through the process of creating a development agreement or amending it. So during the discussion this evening, and as you go through the process with this, just consider that there are criteria when moving forward. Ultimately, this will come to a public hearing, most likely in September. That's 2 months away, gives us time to do the proper notification. But some of these, and just quickly, is consistency with the intent of the overall policies of the comp plan, consistency with the demographic changes, the economic trends, if applicable, the ability for public infrastructure and services, appropriate and efficient use of the public funds, future growth, development, redevelopment of the area, enhancement of the health, safety, and welfare of the town, consistency with South Carolina planning law, impact a proposed amendment on the provisions of the public services, and the application comply with applicable requirements of the application manual. So that's for the comp plan amendment. For the zoning map amendment, these are also criteria you should be considering when you're reviewing this document, which is the consistency with the comprehensive plan, or if conditions have changed since the comprehensive plan was adopted, consistency with the overall intent of the comprehensive plan, capability of the site's physical, geological, hydrological, other environmental features to support the breadth and intensity of uses, compatibility with all potential uses allowed in the proposed zoning district with surrounding uses, capacity of public infrastructure and services to sufficiently accommodate the uses, the public need for the potential uses permitted in the requested zoning district, and compliance with the applicable requirements of the application manual. So, from a location standpoint, I've highlighted the property here in red. It's at the corner of Buck Island Road, Bluffton Parkway, across from Eagles Field, in which it is adjacent to the Old Carolina PUD. Just from an aerial standpoint, you can see the property located here along the Bluffton Parkway. From the PUD map, again, you can see that the purple color is the Old Carolina PUD. The future land use map, you can see that it is designated as that medium density residential. They're requesting for it to go to a high density residential. Zoning map, Again, properties highlighted in yellow, so that yellow would turn to green as represented with Old Carolina PUD. And then we've also provided some sections from the Buck Island-Simmonsville neighborhood plan, which talks about, in Bluffton, low-density residential is defined as 1 unit per 3 acres. Medium densities range from 1 to 3 units per acre, which consists of single-family homes. Multifamily homes may be permitted as long as the overall allowed density is not exceeded. According to the town's comprehensive plan, medium-density residential uses are proposed for the Buck Island-Simmonsville neighborhood. Existing medium-density residential areas within the Buck Island-Simmonsville neighborhood include areas such as Wellstone, Windy Lakes, and Hidden Lakes. And then also wanted to bring to your attention a section that states, and you can see that when the Buck Island-Simmonsville plan was initially created, that this property was discussed and highlighted in the plan, which says throughout the planning process, the Buck Island-Simmonsville residents continually voiced concerns over what was referenced as the Buck Island Square and Old Carolina projects. They had concerns of increased traffic on already inadequate roadways, increases in property taxes, incompatibility with existing neighborhood, and that it goes on to say, it's vital that town staff, planning commission, and town council carefully assess the impact of rezoning requests. Careful assessment should help ensure compatibility with existing neighborhood, thus helping to fulfill the needs and objectives of the Buck Island-Simmonsville neighborhood plan. And due to the proximity of the predominantly low to medium density residential uses prevailing on adjacent properties, these properties should remain zoning designation of general residential at this time. So this is a copy of the schedule, which is, hopefully you had a chance to look at it in your packet. We've been putting these together to help people to kind of understand a process and you know where we've come from and where we're going. So you can see right now where it says Planning Commission Workshop for July 28th. 2 of the items are dark and then 2 of the items are lighter. So the PUD text amendment and the master plan is not, while it's associated with this project, we're not necessarily reviewing those items at this time. But again, it's associated with the project, so you have to take into context all of the applications. So this evening is going to be for discussion and comments. It is anticipated that this would come back as a public hearing in front of you for all 4 of the items at the September meeting, which 3 of them do require that public hearing and the recommendation to council, and then the master plan is just the recommendation to council. From there, it's anticipated it would go to town council for a first reading in November of the 3 items that are listed, and then a January 11th final reading for the 3 items for ordinances, and then the approval of the master plan amendment for the master plan. Again, just to keep a copy of the staff or the presentation, excuse me, the site plan right here. I'm happy to answer questions, and applicants here, Mr. Nestor, you wanted to come up, and I'm happy to just kind of open the dialogue.
The map back on, or the last slide, just so we can.
Right here?
Yeah.
Sure.
Applicant want to say anything before we start? State your name.
My name is Walter Nestor, and I'm an attorney with Burr & Forman Law Firm, and we represent the applicant. And with me tonight, Mr. Jeremy Moss and Gray Batten, and they'll be available to answer any questions that you have. I have to say that it's so very nice to meet you all in person. I've been that big face on the video screen for this year and a half, including Darby. It's so nice to actually see Darby, because Darby's been in control of my life via Zoom for the past year and a half, letting me in, kicking me out, and back and forth. So it's very nice to be here, and we very, very much appreciate back in open session. And I appreciate Mr. I.CALL's presentation. You should have heard Mr. Howard's talking about our application and the analysis of it when we were in front of the DRC. This process is complicated, but one of the things that I would ask that you think about is housing, right? So what have we been reading about, and what have we been hearing about? You as a planning commissioner, citizens of the town of Bluffton, what we've been hearing about is housing and housing and housing. And where does the housing go? Everybody wants housing, and everybody wants there to be housing, affordable housing, but we need a place to put it. And I recognize Buck Isle and Simmonsville Road Plan. We've reviewed that, and certainly we understand what it says. We also understand when it was approved, when it was passed. When we look at this area of the town, we think of what is it going to be? The residents certainly didn't want a shopping center, and they didn't get a shopping center. But it's probably not going to be single-family residential, so it's got to be multifamily residential. And how do you make it multifamily residential? Well, the tool is right in front of us. It's Old Carolina Planned Unit Development. And bringing the Old Carolina Planned Unit Development, expanding it, provides the opportunity for, we believe, a quality housing development. And we believe that that kind of housing is really needed in the town, and you don't really have to go too far away from the Allen Packet to see articles about how the housing need that we're facing. As an employer in the town of Bluffton and in Beaufort County, I can't get people to work for me because they don't have a place to live. They can't afford to live in the town of Bluffton anymore. They certainly can't afford to live in Hilton Head if you can find a place that's for sale or for rent. So housing, is it a desperate situation? As an employer, I say yes. I would suggest that that you all appreciate, to the extent that you're business owners or you're in business, that there's a need for housing. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we welcome your comments tonight. We want you to talk about this. We recognize some of the items that Mr. I.CALL and Mr. Howard have pointed out to us, and we welcome your comments. Mr. Ross, Jeremy, you want to have? Sure. Yeah.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Jeremy Moss. I'm the Vice President of Development for Bonaventure. We are excited to be here, as well as Mr. Nestor described. This is our first proposed development in Bluffton or the Hilton Head area. We are based in Northern Virginia. And I say that not necessarily to scare you that we're coming in from out of town, but it's that we have chosen Bluffton as a place where we would like to come and do business for a long time. Bonaventure is a full-service real estate firm. You don't know us yet. Hopefully you will soon. We do all of our own site negotiation, all of our own design. We do our own construction. We do our own property management. And I say that to describe us as a long-term hold company, one that intends to build an apartment like this that we're proposing here, and to partner with the town of Bluffton and to be here for a long time. So as you email and talk with me now, 10 or 15 years from now, as you have questions or things come up or we come in front of you again, you should hear the same names over and over again relative to Bonaventure. We're not going to sweep in and build this proposed development, sell it to somebody else from out of town, and you'll never see us again as we move on throughout the country. That's not what we do. We are a relatively new firm. We started 21 years ago, and we have built 13 projects from the ground up, mostly in Virginia, throughout Richmond, Northern Virginia, and the Hampton Roads area. But we have identified Bluffton, as Mr. Nestor described, as a place that needs housing and a place that would be a perfect fit for the Bonaventure product. You have before you a plan. We have received comments from staff. We intend to work with staff as much as we can to ensure that the plan is consistent with your needs and your vision for this site, and then to also ensure that our impact on our neighbors, who, again, we intend to be their neighbors for a long time, is minimized, both from an aesthetic standpoint, traffic, schools, et cetera. So we're here today with an open mind, and we'd like to talk with you about the development, hear what you say, and try to find a plan that could work for all of us. And with that, I'll turn the floor back over and happy to answer any questions.
Art, with any questions?
You talk about housing. Can you give us an idea of, is there some affordable housing in this proposal, and if so, how much?
There is. The short answer is yes, there is affordable housing. Right now, our intention is to comply with the 20% affordable housing requirement from the town. So with 188 units, that puts us at, I think, 37 affordable housing units at 100% AMI. So whatever the plan eventually ends with the number of units, we intend to provide that 20% affordable.
20 or 30?
20%, that's right.
If I could, just some more background information. As most of you remember, we actually went through a Unified Development Ordinance text amendment about a year and a half ago, where any new planned unit development, or if someone was coming into a planned unit development that had a residential component to it, initially was a 10% requirement, and we changed that to 20%. So that's why this project now, since they're coming into a planned unit development, they're required to meet that 20%.
Yes, thank you.
Did you do a study on what, on how many DUs would be if you just followed what was currently allowed?
Yeah, I think the by right zoning allows something like 62, kind of up to townhome style buildings. So I think the current development is about 62 units. Single family, that's right.
Current zoning is our residential 4.
It's 15.52 acres. Of that, about 6.5 is the wetlands area that's shown on the left-hand side.
Not right now.
Walter, you made the assumption, why no single-family residence? Why did you make that assumption?
Sorry,
Single-family residence won't work on this property. Why were we making that assumption?
Well, based on my client's review of the property, you know, that is completely subjective. I wasn't trying to speak for anybody else.
No, I just wanted to dig into that and see. On a staff question, there's no density assigned to this other than that by right 4 units per acre, single family, right?
Under current code, it's 4 units per acre. Now, there are provisions for affordable housing that if you were to develop it's a sliding scale. So, you know, at 50%, you could get a 50% increase in your density. But again, it's still single-family, detached, or attached housing.
To get that, isn't it, Mr. Reichert, you have 100% has to be, to get the bonus density, 100% of it used for affordable workforce?
Again, there's a sliding scale in the Unified Development Ordinance. So if you did 25%, you know, of your project as affordable housing, then you get the 25% more units. If you do 100% of your project as affordable housing, then you get a full bonus. So in this case, currently allowed 62 units. If they did 100% of that as affordable housing, then you get an additional 62 units, which is 120. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily mean that 120 can fit. Right.
Yeah. I know that historically, council and planning commission have been concerned with, we have so many units approved in this town that we don't want to add units willy-nilly, and so we're taking 62, and I'm talking to the commission here for a second, we're taking 62 units and they're asking for 3 times that. Another staff clarification question, the PUD, the Carolina PUD, they don't need to accept this in. This is just a matter of the applicant wants to wrap it into it, and if we say it's okay, they get wrapped into it. Right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Just to make a brief statement, and I'm certain, Mr. Nestor, you know I like you, and I consider you a friend. But I cannot think of a project that is more opposite of what was intended for an area than this project is. You have a cultural neighborhood there that you're talking about plopping a huge project with massive buildings in the middle of, in an area where the traffic is already stressed and strained. I don't see any way anything close to this could come to fruition if we were to take into account the needs and wants of the town's master plan, of the Buck Island Simmonsville study that we did, and everything else that was in that. You asked for feedback, and I'm giving you feedback from my perspective. And that's it, yeah.
Can you give us information on the traffic, like what y'all studied and how that impacts? Density would impact this intersection.
Well, we don't, we're certainly, that would be part of the application, but we don't have that information yet.
have engaged a traffic consultant to provide both trip generation and a traffic study. They're working with Department of Transportation to ensure that the scope is appropriate. The initial response, at least from our traffic engineers, that no significant level of service change will occur at the intersection of Buck Island and Bluffton Parkway. And part of that is because of the additional access that we are putting through the wetlands area onto Bluffton Parkway. And we were intentional about that in somewhat reaction to what Mr. Wetmore is saying, which is we're trying to make sure that our traffic doesn't have a negative impact, particularly on Ballfield, which is a relatively small road that ends in the neighborhood. So our goal is certainly to direct traffic away from that road to the extent that it's not improved as part of our plan, and to ensure that our traffic doesn't have a negative impact on that particular area, particularly traffic that exits the development. So you can see, make a right out, go out to Bluffton Parkway and make a right. So we've certainly been cognizant of that. And we recognize the scale of the buildings is different than what's currently there. And we also, to Mr. Wetmore's point relative to the density is, in our experience, multifamily is a little bit, multifamily residents are a little bit more accommodating to traffic and traffic noise. So the closer we get to Bluffton Parkway and that intersection, we will get, our residents are generally more accommodating of that kind of traffic noise than what we would get if we developed a single family neighborhood, townhomes, or even single family rentals, for example. Expectations for sound and light and other things that comes from a relatively well-traveled road like Bluffton Parkway create a development more like this than you would for detached single family.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. The $600,000 homes in Hampton Lake that are 100 yards from
Kevin, can you pull up that map that has it's where it shows like where the medium density and the high density? I just wanted to see, now it's currently medium, but like where is the high in this area? Like where's the nearest high density? Like what's so I can compare what we're. Because it's right now, this would be its own, it'd be the only thing right there in a pocket of all medium. So I just wanted to see.
There's a few areas that's Wellstone there. Is that Vista View? Off of May River Road?
Yes.
Oh, that backs up to that.
Yeah, back there. Yep.
Crown at Old Carolina as well. That's in the PUD, so that
That's in
won't
the
show.
PUD, yeah. So I'm sorry, like this is not the.
Hey, no, I just wanted to be able to visually see what the next surrounding closest one would be. Wellstone, I suppose.
Yeah, so you can see it in this map. And Wellstone was actually developed as a PUD as well.
Just a point of clarification, maybe this is to Mr. I.CALL. Your review point number 2 said the mass and scale of the 86 buildings are completely out of character, not only for Buck Island, but for the town of Bluffton. Their footprint is over 300% larger than any other multifamily building. Now, is that a requirement or is that a suggestion? And if it's a suggestion or a requirement, how would you address that and still make this economically viable for yourself?
So that was a staff comment, and that was reflective of various apartment complexes within Bluffton, where we just did an overview of just kind of get an estimate of both footprint and then for stories for overall square footage of existing apartment complexes in the area, to give the perspective to you to understand how large their buildings are being proposed compared to other apartment complex buildings in the area.
What's the number of stories on this?
There's 2 3-story buildings. The 2 larger buildings are 3 stories, and then the 3 smaller buildings are 2-story carriage house style, which is a garage underneath and a flat style apartment above. To your point, Upon receipt of comments from staff, it became clear that the mass and size of the buildings is inconsistent with the expectations of the town are. And we're hearing that tonight as well. And what I can assure you is that we will go back to the drawing board to ensure that we can comply with that. Now, we are somewhat site constrained. Of course, I've got 6.5 acres of wetlands. I've got to provide some road on or near the site that goes down to ball field. So it's almost certain that we will lose units, which is probably, for this body, an important portion of what we're going to do. But our intention is to try to comply with the 20 units. Hopefully, we can get slightly under. We do have a 3-story breezeway style walk-up that's consistent with the architecture in town that I think will do well here. And like I said, it will result in a reduction of units, but our intention is to comply with the request.
Mr. Delco, if I may, I mean, that's an excellent question, but to explain the process, oftentimes there's no place to make. So you do have to make the economics work, price of the land, price of construction, and how it's going to perform. Then you have to find that piece of land that's going to perform. And then you have to try to figure out what might be allowed there and how we can allow it. And so an applicant before the town in a situation like this really is negotiating against itself, trying to figure out where to go, and that's why the comments from staff are critical to us in this process, but we don't change the application to come to the workshop. The application is what the application is, and as it works through the process, our hope is that we get to an application that can receive a favorable recommendation, not only from staff, but from the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
That's why we value workshops like this. Workshops like this are excellent. Town council has a negotiating committee. We would expect or hope that we could go to the negotiating committee as part of the rezoning, that we could have discussions with town council and find out what it is that they want for this property. And again, as I said earlier, we recognize and believe that town council is very anxious to get housing, affordable housing, and market rate housing.
For the parcels to the south, what are those zoned as or will be?
You can see there are 3 rectangular properties. Those are all currently zoned the residential general.
Currently, it's just individual
Lots.
property.
Yeah. There may be multiple mobile homes on the lots, but not necessarily.
Looking at the Google Maps photo, there are.
Yeah, there's a small collection of mobile homes.
And after, like, if you keep going south, it's just all
Right here.
residential, smaller.
Yeah. So those are all, I think the majority that's out there would be mobile homes with multiple units on lots.
So is there any intention of improving Ballfield Road? I'm just thinking, I mean, if you're going to put that impact, I know that
Yes.
road's not that.
So currently, Ballfield Road, it dead ends, it dead ends in essence into Centerfield Road. That is a county-maintained road. And then,
I guess what happens with, they come in and then they're adding extra impact. Has to deal with that.
I mean, any changes required to Ballfield Road or permitted to Ballfield Road would be at the direction and approval of Beaufort County through encroachment permit.
well, everything's a concern to
No,
us.
I know, but I mean,
It's a concern, but as far as approval,
Right.
the town
That's
would
not
have,
And
the town would rely on the approved encroachment permit from Beaufort County. That would be a requirement that they would have to provide.
And kind of as I was saying that, we do have to look at this from a holistic approach. However, for this evening's purposes, we're focusing on that comprehensive plan, the workshop for the comprehensive plan, as well as for the zoning map amendment. As this moves forward, then,
Technical.
yes, as Mr. Nestor had mentioned, they're going to kind of go back and reassess the site plan based off of the discussion that we have this evening, comments that were received from DRC, make adjustments to those, and then resubmit that master plan amendment for staff to review it, and then potentially provide additional comments based on what they have. And then we can then start, fine tuning that plan, bringing it back to you. Those items, Beaufort County is aware, South Carolina DOT is aware of this project. There's been some initial feedback that's been provided, but there haven't, obviously, no approvals of sorts. But, those are things that we will, as the plan moves forward, would become more fine-tuned as to exact locations of these connections.
I have to agree with Charlie and town staff. It's project as it stands right now just seems to be, I don't know what else to say.
I was going to agree with Charlie as well. The massing and the amount. Much.
So if we're able to go back, just to continue that conversation, and let's say that we can take this building that I'm going to say looks like a T, the big building, and then the smaller building at the bottom, that are 3 stories. To the extent that we can reduce those from 86 or 84 units to, let's call them 18 to 20, consistent with staff comments, still be 3 stories. We could probably clad them with like townhouse style end caps so they have the appearance of being single family, at least single family. That's something that's more palatable with the reduction in density. The economics, to Mr. Nestor's point, dictate some significant density. So I can't get down to 62 units. The economics work, but we can reduce the density 10%. And in smaller buildings, we can get to a place that I think is closer with what you envision for the site. It would be tucked back away. We do have some some plans to save some of the existing trees, particularly some of the larger ones. We can create landscape buffers, et cetera, particularly to the south. We just talked about the neighbors that are to the south of us. They would not be aesthetically impacted by buffer fencing or otherwise. To the extent that we can reduce the mass and scale, are we still having a conversation, or is the pure number of units, even if it's at 165, 160, let's say, that's still a place that's not palatable and still out of character in the minds of the commission? Recognizing that discussion, not a vote, but I think that that's, economically, that's probably where we can get. It's a 10% reduction. And I do think, to your point, Ms. Denmark, the scale is something that we can address pretty significantly.
And getting your feedback on those kind of numbers is helpful, and it's not binding. I mean, it's not binding on the commissioners. You could say 100, that works fine for me today. It might not work fine for you when you see the plan. Right. Just having some idea, so we're not really, again, negotiating against ourselves. And back to Ballfield Road, I mean, that's the front of the community. So there's definitely going to be some, Ballfield Road will be addressed one way or another. It can't stay as a dirt county-owned, county-maintained road. So we would anticipate that being the front of the development, that would change.
I can only speak for myself, but we went through so much over the past 10 to 20 years to define what we want in this part of town, and this just, I'm sorry. That's how I feel. I'm one of 7.
Can you give an example, since you've been here probably as far as what a vision might have been?
When the people of Buck Island and Simmonsville annexed into the town, they annexed into the town hoping that they could keep the community feel that they have, which is very eclectic and very much single-family residential. And it's getting gentrified and it's changing, but a lot of those people are still there, and it's a place where you can walk out in your yard and you can see your neighbors, and I'd love to get feedback from that community, not for the community to decide what goes or doesn't go here, but we look back at the Buck Island Simmonsville study that was done and the input from all the stakeholders in that study, and we get a good feel for what was requested. And there are a certain amount of things that can be done by right. I mean, you look at Pulte is doing all the, and I'm just giving an example, Pulte is doing all these little communities with 30 and 40 and 60 homes and putting them into pockets, and that would fit in something like this. The neighbors may not like it, but that's a by right, what was decided through that whole process. This isn't necessarily a bad project. I just, in my opinion, the location.
And I think, Mr. Whitmore, I mean, your comment is a very appropriate one, that there is some gentrification going on down there. And that's one of the things that we do want the commission to look at, because as the community changes, that gentrification sometimes can mean taking 1 acre and turning it into four lots with four mobile homes. And not to argue the point, but is that getting the housing that the town really needs? And are those the people that are living there today that participated in the early 2000s in the Buck Island Simmonsville Road? And I don't know, but I think that your point is an excellent one, that we need to speak to some of those people to see where they are for this kind of a project, and appreciate that.
I don't know what the magic number is as far as units, but say that, you were allowed to do more than the 62. Just from a massing standpoint, if you could break those buildings up into smaller pieces instead of large footprints, that's something that is not, I mean, we've argued about this other projects around town, like that's just.
Certainly jumps out at the page as you look at it from the 2D overhead view. At least on the developable portion, it jumps out on the page, and I recognize that. Like I said, if we were looking at it and it was spread out through the entirety of the 15.52 acres, maybe it would feel different, but it's not. And it's the site constraint that we're dealing with. So, as I mentioned earlier, we hear what staff is saying. We certainly hear what the Planning Commission is saying, and our intention is to be what I said at the very beginning, a partner with the town, and we're going to do our best to that, as Mr. Nestor described, allows the project to move forward, and that important housing will be provided to the people of Bluffton. The other thing that I will say, at least relative to some of the national home builders, is that even though Bonaventure is based in Alexandria, Virginia, and we serve as our general contractor, we're dedicated to using local and regional subcontractors, including probably some tradespeople that live in the immediate area. The folks that we use to build our buildings are generally representative of the population around us. So we don't build them in a warehouse and ship them down on trucks, down 95 and pull off and just bring them on site and nail them together. These are people that will sleep in the neighborhoods in which we build our products. We'll pass them every day. We'll be proud of them. We'll point to them as with their children in the car and say, yep, we helped build those. So, I just wanted to make a slight distinction, because you're right, if we had the economics necessary to come in and build out of a kit, we could probably build significantly less units. But unfortunately, fortunately, that's not the product type that we do, and that's not the quality of work that we want to be known for. And I think it serves our communities better by using, like I said, local and regional tradespeople in particular. So I'd like to make that distinction. I wish we could always drive down costs and build pursuant to the zoning ordinance without any variances. Our life would be a lot easier. We aren't always allowed to do that. And, this particular project, the needs of those around it are different necessarily than probably what, others might want for the site. So we're finding that fine line. So.
One other point, I think as I drive down the Bluffton Parkway a lot, and I remember the time when there was no Bluffton Parkway, the Bluffton Parkway has changed the areas in which it runs through. And, 45 miles per hour is the speed limit. I'm not going to take a poll about who drives 45 miles per hour on Bluffton Parkway, but it's challenging. So that's my point, is that, as the town grows, parts of the town change. And I recognize what the Planning Commission's role is and what the comprehensive plan's role is, but property does change, and the character of property does change. And that's why we try to identify areas where there might be an opportunity to change, to provide something to the town that it needs.
I think, just in my opinion, the comprehensive plan spells out what the people of the neighborhood wanted, and any deviation from that, I would have concerns about a project of this, making a recommendation for approval. But again, 7. But to me, it just stands out as an extreme deviation from what the desire was for that community.
It's clear to me that we need to do a better job of engaging our immediate neighbors. Probably should call a community meeting, at least hyper-local to our site, to ensure that those that are affected by it can have an opportunity to talk to us, just like you all have, provide their input. To the extent that we can make changes, we will do that. And to the extent that they may not have concerns, then we can report that back, or ask that they report that directly to you all. So I appreciate that.
Advocate for community involvement.
Absolutely.
Always have them, might not have to do everything they say, but just so you know.
Sure. When you engage early in the process, and sometimes before you get staff feedback, then you find yourself in a position to go to them with 3 or 4 plans, and it immediately erodes your credibility. So now that we have feedback from staff, feedback from the Planning Commission, it's certainly a good time for us to get as close as we can to a finalized plan, take that to the community and say, we think that this is the best that we can do here, but we're willing to get feedback and make changes as we can. I think we're getting close to that point, so it sounds like now is probably the time to engage the local community.
I would review that comp plan and the Buck Island Simmonsville, what was it called?
Buck Island Simmonsville Neighborhood Plan?
Thank you.
Mouthful.
Sorry, brain malfunction. But I would review those as well, if you haven't already.
Yeah, we absolutely have, and it's certainly something
Probably
that
got it memorized.
we'll spotlight that to the neighbors who may not be aware that that's what the plan currently says, and ensure we put that in front and say, this is what the town has said, at least when it was adopted. This is what we're proposing, kind of see
If there's no more questions, I just brought back up the kind of next steps. Again, this is tentative of September 22nd, based off of a lot of the feedback that you've provided, applicant having some type of community involvement meeting, making the necessary changes to the plan, specifically for the master plan. Take that into account. This is obviously subject to change, and what we'll do is we'll work with the applicants to fine tune from a timing standpoint as to when they'll be able to get all this documentation to us, as well as holding the meeting, feedback from the meeting, and then bringing it back to you. So it may be September, or it may be the following month, and then of course, everything kind of shifts down for town council meetings. There's no vote.
Nothing
No,
to do.
you don't have to do anything. You
move
can say thank you very much.
I think we'll just say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your time and your comments.
All right. Katie, is your applicant here? Do you want to go to that item, 101 Windrush Lane?
My applicant has misread the date on it. He confirmed that he would be here tonight, but has unfortunately is in Charleston, unable to be at tonight's meeting, so he's requested we move it to next month's agenda, and we'll have that on the.
I need to make a.
I don't. No. We'll move it to the. Yeah, it was never opened.
No.
So.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so then we will move on to item 4, which is the Unified Development Ordinance Amendments. It's a public hearing. Amendments to the Town of Bluffton Code of Ordinances, Chapter 23, UDO Article 3, application process to establish Section 3.26, proactive preservation and maintenance of contributing structures. Charlotte.
Thank you, appreciate it. This ordinance that is proposed this evening actually isn't new. We had a previous maintenance of contributing structures ordinance prior to the Unified Development Ordinance being adopted in 2011. For some reason, it did not make it into the UDO, and we are attempting to reestablish it. It's just a slightly different format than it was previously. Let me, oops, thank you. And somehow we ended up.
You just broke it all.
I sure did, didn't I?
Click on it first. I think that's what happened.
Here we go. Excuse me. All righty. So let me tell you a little bit about the proposed ordinance and what this is intended to do. This is proposed to allow the town to step in when we see any kind of deterioration, any sort of structural defects, any kind of decay in our contributing structures. And I'll explain what that is in just a moment. Our contributing structures help make up Old Town Historic District. They put the historic in historic district. There are many reasons why neglect may occur. It could be anything to an absentee property owner who has a contributing structure, who's completely unaware of the issue. It could be a financial reason. The property owner just simply doesn't have the funds to be able to correct whatever the issues are. And there may be occasions when a property owner intentionally allows a building to decline because they want to do something else with the property and the building's in the way. They may have attempted to remove the contributing status and perhaps were denied, or they've tried to move or relocate the structure to another property and may have been unable to do that. So basically the building is allowed to set and be neglected because regular maintenance is not occurring. So what we'd like to do is to collaborate with property owners, step in when we feel that there's a need based on certain conditions, and develop a preservation plan. So the point of this text amendment is not to be punitive, but to be collaborative and try to save structures that we have that are contributing. So contributing structures, again, the Old Town Historic District has approximately 82 contributing structures, which are historic to some degree. They may be architecturally significant. They may have had an event take place there that makes them significant. Collectively, all of these structures together help make up our historic district by virtue of location, architecture, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. We have had a National Register district since 1996, and then in 2007, Old Town Bluffton was created, and that's our 1 square mile of town. I'll show you a map of that in just a moment. Most of our historic structures or contributing structures are located within our National Register district, and 2 of them are significant individually, the Church of the Cross, and more recently, Campbell Chapel AME. We are focusing right now on Old Town Historic District. Eventually, we may want to consider looking at other historic resources outside of this area, but for the time being, we are focused on the area in green, which is the Old Town Historic District. You can see the little yellow tabs there identify all of our contributing structures. The area in orange is the National Register District, and then the areas that you see with the little orange tab, those are previously contributing structures that were demolished. And we'd like to not see those orange tabs pop up in the future. So the process for this ordinance is pretty simple. I'm going to explain these various steps here from the identification part to the remediation part, And hopefully, there won't be an appeals process, an appeal of the plan, but there may be, and I'll talk about that too. So the first step is to allow anyone in the town to submit a petition, and it'll be on a form that we will create. And they will identify a particular building that they're concerned about and ask the town to investigate whether or not any of the conditions of neglect exist. I'll talk about that in a moment. And we don't want this to be something people just frivolously petition because they're upset with the property owner. So it's only going to be allowed to occur once per year per property. So conditions of neglect may vary. It could be anything from deterioration of stucco, of brick, seen perhaps a chimney pulling away from the building. Any of these things may be a potential condition of neglect, and it also includes things such as walls and fences, which we call site features. And so the UDO administrator would investigate the petition, any of the conditions that were identified. UDO administrator or staff acting on the administrator's behalf would go out from the road, from the right-of-way, and determine whether or not there is perhaps neglect occurring. If that's the case, the town will then contact the property owner and then explain what the process is, ask them to come in to meet, and to develop a preservation plan. And basically, that's what can we do to remediate the conditions that we're seeing, what types of permits, what types of review process might be needed, and what a timeline would be. Additionally, we'd like to be able to identify whether or not there are any grants or tax incentives that we might be able to offer or find for the property owner. And we are working on a tax abatement text amendment right now that we'll bring forward in the fall. So that outcome of the investigation will lead to a preservation plan. If the property owner is not in agreement with that plan, they do have the potential to appeal to the Historic Preservation Commission, and they can bring forward any information that they have. The Preservation Commission could look that over and determine whether or not they have a sufficient claim and perhaps make an amendment to the plan that was developed by the UDO administrator. They can also claim an economic hardship potentially, and if they do that, in that case, they will have to provide certain information for the Preservation Commission to determine whether or not a hardship would exist. And they have to be able to prove that there's no way for that property to earn any kind of reasonable economic return based on that plan, or that it would deprive them of all reasonable use of the property. And this is a very common provision in any sort of proactive preservation ordinance. Some places call it demolition by neglect, but we're calling it preservation or proactive preservation. So if there is an economic hardship that is found by the Preservation Commission, again, they can revise the preservation plan. There may be an extension of a timeline. There may be more opportunity to look for funding to assist with whatever needs to be done for that property. There's penalties and remedies, and hopefully it never gets to this. And I do really want to emphasize that the intent is to keep this as much as possible at the staff level and to work with property owners. But if it does come to a point where we've gone through the appeals process and nothing is being done, there is the ability of the town to step in and potentially make the corrections or whatever repairs may be necessary. And that would be done through a lien process. And we have talked about this with our town attorney. And there is case law, there is state law that would allow for us to do that. So it's a fairly simple process. There are other communities in the state that do have preservation by neglect ordinances. We've had it before in the past. Again, I don't know what happened to it, why it went away, but we do believe that it's necessary. And there are some buildings around town that you may be aware of where this may apply. Because this is a text amendment, there's certain review criteria that have to be considered, and the amendments do comply with all of them, including consistency with the comprehensive plan, as well as the town's strategic plan. This is a best planning practice, and it's becoming a more common approach to preservation in communities across the country. It will assist with the welfare of town by ensuring that we're keeping our older historic buildings and keeping the community from becoming blighted. There is no effect on public services, and this is in compliance with the applications manual. So the action tonight of the Planning Commission would be to either approve the application as it's been submitted. The text, the full text has been provided to you. You can make amendments to the text that's been proposed, or you can deny it. If it moves forward tonight, it will be reviewed by Town Council at their August 10th meeting with a final and reading and a public hearing on September 14th. We do have an effective date showing as January 1st of 2022. We have some other amendments related to preservation that we'd like to have packaged together and for them to become effective together on January 1st. And with that, be glad to answer any questions.
Could you go back to the slide of the development of the preservation plan?
While you're going there, if I could, just point of clarification, it's a recommendation of approval or denial for this evening. And then also, prior to a vote, this is a public hearing, so we just need to make sure that you open the public hearing and then close the public hearing. So I don't believe that we did that at the beginning of it.
I need to do that.
But you don't necessarily need to do that right this moment. Okay.
So I'm not certain which slide. I think it may be this one.
Thank you. I just wanted to review it again.
Okay, thank you. I may have gone a little too fast.
No, that's okay.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Apologize, I had to step out for a minute. Are we saying that there isn't anything in effect right now?
There is not. Only the building code is in effect. So if we see a building that's open, for example, we may require that if there's no doors, no windows.
The demo by neglect that we had before, I think it's attachment 3.
Why it did not make it to the UDO, I don't know.
Probably a clerical or something.
Yeah, the code, and it was the unified code or the just zoning code, and it was there, but then when the UDO was created, that section was just not included into the new code.
When did that change over from the unified?
2011.
So basically, I can think of 2 structures in particular that are just wasting away right now and nobody's doing anything. We have no power, or the town has no power right now to do anything.
Under current code,
But
you are
this
correct.
would do it.
Correct.
First of all, thank you. I think you've done a great job, and I know we talked about preventing the unintended consequences, and you've done a great job with that. My question is, and I'm going to put myself in the seat of a property owner. What if you're coming up to a building that is literally already falling apart, and it would be just incredibly expensive to restore it or preserve it? Is there any criteria that the town is going to use to say, it's too far gone, we're not going to push this one?
Potentially, and I think that's part of the investigation process. I mean, there may be opportunity for the town to have assistance from a consultant, a structural engineer perhaps, to make that determination. Sometimes the property owners will provide their own assessment. But if you've been to, I actually had some photos, I took out some photos from Savannah where the buildings looked literally like they were about to fall down that had been rehabilitated. Historic Savannah Foundation has a revolving fund, and through that fund, they've been able to save a number of buildings throughout the city, which, potentially that could happen here as well. I think it's necessary to do what we can to help the property owner, especially to help them look for funding that may not be available. So I think this particular ordinance, as compared to the previous ordinance that we have, is more collaborative and really will make the attempt to try to do everything we can to save buildings and not have it be punitive. So I think, I think all buildings can be saved. It comes down to a matter of money to be able to do it.
I'd like to say I'm personally excited about this. Been waiting for this for a very long time, so thank you.
I have a question, actually a couple. Is there any reason that the town couldn't be working with some of the neglected properties currently to try to find funding to bring those properties up to par and create a plan now?
I don't want to speak out of turn here. I think we can do that. One, we don't have a property maintenance ordinance. That makes it somewhat difficult. This just establishes the process, and it provides an opportunity for an appeals if the property owner is not in agreement. I know that we have reached out to some property owners where, if we've seen something, a broken window, perhaps a hole in the roof, we have reached out and they have made those corrections, but it may not be enough in some cases, particularly if a property owner is not wanting to do that. At least now we have some teeth to be able to pursue a bit more. Again, I think we just don't have enough of the ability right now to be able to do that.
Is there an assessment of the number of properties that would be considered neglected at this point? I mean, is there?
And that's something that we are pursuing. We actually have hired a historic preservationist as of earlier this month. And he has been tasked with going out and looking at the conditions of all of our structures and making a determination if some look to be in a condition that really need to be, where intervention is immediately necessary or should be pursued rather quickly. So we are looking at that right now.
Are there any properties that essentially someone would have bought the property? I think it wouldn't have been possible, but this is why I'm asking, because of the timeline of this window of when that was not, where this ordinance wasn't in place. Could it be possible somebody bought the property and it wasn't identified as a historic contributing structure, and now they're in a situation where it's been identified subsequent to their purchase of the property that now puts a burden on them that they wouldn't have expected when they purchased the property?
The 82 structures have been identified as contributing since 2008. So I would think anyone who purchased property since that time would have done their due diligence and have been aware that they purchased a property that had a contributing structure, and that there was going to be, there's going to be some additional steps that they're going to have to be aware of if they want to develop the property.
I would say, like in 2008 too, structures. I mean, people knew. There were workshops and I mean, that they knew when they became contributing structures. It's not like anybody was blindsided.
There was also certified mailings that went out, and we have the return receipts of all of those.
But you could have bought the property, say 2006, prior to the determination of this, where you weren't necessarily.
But I believe back then there were different workshops that happened for the public to be aware.
There were. I was on council then. There were, every property owner of the contributing structures.
They were made aware subsequent after they purchased. They could have purchased. Perhaps I'm not communicating it well, or perhaps I'm not receiving the response well. But you could have bought the property in 2006 prior to this 2008 change. And at the time, that wasn't considered a contributing structure. 2008, the rules changed now. Suddenly you have a contributing structure that may have been basically falling in at the time, but might still be hanging on by a string, that now the town wants you to bring, that's going to strong arm you to bring back up to speed. That to me seems like an
But I think
undue
that was the
burden.
past, and we're going forward, and from, like, we have the 82 that everybody knows about, and we're going forward from that.
Well,
There will be,
I get what you're saying, but there were, by my memory, just from having been on council then, there were two things on that. First of all, they weren't deemed contributing structures if they were falling apart. So, for example, Frankie Coburn has some properties next to the promenade that were caved in that could have been contributing structures, and they determined they weren't because they were too far gone.
Okay.
Okay, and number two, everybody who owned a piece of property that they wanted to make a contributing structure had an opportunity to provide feedback as to why, if they didn't believe it was a contributing structure, and go through that process. Now, I can't speak as to what happened when both sides disagreed, if that indeed did happen on any of them. But I do know that process happened in 08, 07 actually, and then 08.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What, if I'm a property owner, I sit like you, mister. If I'm a property owner and I'm in possession of something that I know that needs to be brought up to speed, but I don't have the funds, and I'm hearing but now I got to jump through hoops, right? The town's coming to me, says you got to do something, and now my whole life I have to dedicate to switching to take care of and address this by either providing a ton of documentation that I wasn't planning on doing. I might have to hire a lawyer. I've got to take time out of my busy workday to come meet with people. This is, as a property owner, this would be a lot. Now, maybe I should have been doing something over the last 10, 15 years to have prevented this situation, but nevertheless, it still would put me in a bind currently. And I'm in a situation where I'm looking at, I may or may not be able to get funds from somewhere else, even if I'm in an economic hardship. And the town's wanting to put more economic burden on by potentially fining me, even though I'm not able to do it. And they can't promise, you're saying you're willing to work, but you can't promise it. It makes me nervous applying a punitive process to this. I understand the reason why it's being done, but it would make me, and I don't know how many properties are actually affected by this, because there's not a assessment of that for me to look at. That may not be a potential issue for anybody that is on these homes.
Well, let me emphasize that, again, this is a collaborative process. We know that every property is going to be different, and the circumstances and the financial abilities are going to be different for different property owners. So we want to do everything we can to work with property owners. If they're having financial difficulties and they simply cannot do it, we'll do everything we can to find a way to make that happen. And it may be that the types of repairs that are necessary may not be possible, but at least we can do something to secure the building so that we don't have any further deterioration. There will be no fines. It's not written into the ordinance. So I want to make that clear too. And it may be something, again, I really cannot overemphasize this. This is a collaborative process. We don't want to do anything that's going to put a burden on someone. We don't want to create hardships, but we want to make certain that we do preserve the few buildings that we have, and we've already lost some. And there's still the ability to apply for a request for demolition. If the building's too far gone, the property owner just doesn't want to deal with it, they can file an application to have the building demolished, or they can do a request to council to ask that the status be removed from the structure, and then it can be demolished that route. So there are other mechanisms available.
Does this process make that process more challenging? Adding this makes
I don't think so, because through this process, we may come to that conclusion ourselves as a town, that perhaps there's something that can't be saved. The Sarah Riley Hooks cottage was one that was deteriorating, and the town actually stepped in and purchased it. So who knows, there could be some ability for the town to do that again. That's not a promise to any property owner, but individually we'll look at the circumstances and then work on a plan to do what we can to save the building.
The process for determining these contributing structures, I know you mentioned that they had to have some historical reference, architecturally significant. One of the things I've got running in the back of my mind is the Guccio project, which the property, which they had to work really hard to be able to get that building demolished in order to put a new home on there. Which didn't have a significant event, really wasn't architecturally significant, and was literally falling apart. And it was one heck of a battle for them. They had to get a petition and have a lot of people sign, and it was a daunting task for them to take on to do. And I just don't want to see somebody else have to go through some. I like the rest of the commission, I want to preserve Bluffton because I think it's important as part of our sense of place and character. But I'm also sensitive to property rights. And so I'm nervous about doing this because I'm just concerned about what position it can put individuals in that have these properties.
I also feel like this at least gives us verbiage of what to do, what can be done, because right now we have nothing. We have nothing to go by. So I think this is a first step of having something for property owners, for applicants to look at and read and understand what the options are. Right now, we have nothing. And they've hired a preservationist, and he seems like he's going to go out. I mean, I've met him the other day, and he seems like he's going to be very diligent in looking into each of these structures. So he may find something isn't contributing, or there might be, I don't know, way far gone, but it's got to start somewhere, and like they haven't had that yet. So I think we have to give them a chance, because if not, we're going to be stuck doing the same thing over and over again, and it's never going to get better. And we have to protect the historic district. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what we are. So I just think that we have to start somewhere, and I think that they've done a great job of recognizing, and they are trying to partner up and come up with these different plans. Now, there are things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, but they're trying to help people that can't afford to. I can tell you a bunch of them people can't afford to do, but they're not going to sit there and fine them every second for not doing it. They're going to try and help and facilitate some type of relationship between another entity to help them so that we can preserve the history, because it's not about hurting the property owner. It's about preserving the history and the contributing structures. So I think this is like super important.
I actually agree with both of you on this one. This might help. I don't know if you caught it or not, because I didn't initially. If there's a conflict like that where the property owner is just like, I can't afford this, I can't do this, I don't agree with them or whatever, if I'm reading this right, and please confirm if I am, that 3.26.5, they can appeal to the HPC, which is just like we are, citizens and business owners in the town that hopefully would use almost like a third-party common sense of, okay, town wants it fixed, property owner can't fix it, what's a good resolution? And that may be I don't know, that may be something that helps with the comfort level on that.
Yeah. Now it's written in there. We all know what the steps are.
Right, which was to your point of that this kind of codifies that.
We've been in a very gray area, obviously, for 10 years.
Scares the hell out of me.
And we've all talked about whatever happened to that. Well, I don't know, it just disappeared. So now we're going to have something that's real, like you know.
With that historic preservationist coming through, is that going to be potentially adding any properties, identifying any additional properties that might be considered historic structures? Probably using the wrong word there. Or what might it eliminate or remove any of the properties from that list?
No, at this time, no, it's not recognized that there will be additional contributing structures in Old Town, and nothing will be removed, so it will be the 82. And we have updated the Historic Resource Survey, which will be moving forward to Town Council this fall.
Are all of our recommendations?
Again, prior to making any recommendation, it is a public hearing.
Oh.
I'd like for you to open
Open it up to
open the public hearing
You didn't
and ask
put it
for
on my
comments.
cheat sheet.
Sorry.
Okay, so I need to open it up for public hearing.
Yes.
And we have someone that's been waiting this whole time. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
I didn't plan to stay for this.
Okay, well, state
'Cause
your
I did-
name and address for the record, please.
Joe Fraser, Fraser Construction. We just happen to have a new client that has purchased the Coburn property. Very interested in preserving the two contributing structures that are on that property, particularly the Red Dot liquor store. That particular building really needs immediate attention. You know, the process to get approved to do basically anything of the kind of things you're talking about in repairs is expensive and burdensome and time consuming. And, most of your conversation has really been about people that have the structures and are not doing anything about them. And are going to let them deteriorate, fall down, and then want to demolish them. Like, we all know some buildings that has happened. What this doesn't address is for the property owner who would like to take an immediate action, how do you streamline it? How do you make it, how do you work with them so that they can respond quickly? On the Red Dot liquor store, the roof needs probably to be reframed. They want to preserve it, but, it'll take, to go through the process to develop a plan, go through all the different people or boards that have to approve it, is a 4 or 5 month process. That, it would be great if this also had something for the property owner that has the resources and wants to do something, to be able to do it quickly. I'm not talking about doing a total renovation, but how do you shore it up so that it doesn't degrade any further? So that would be my comment there. So.
And I think, Charlotte, you touched on that, though, that talking about streamlining, at some point when you were talking, it sounded like you were talking about how the town would try and be willing to help.
I didn't hear anything in what she said that sounded like it was streamlining to me.
Well, maybe not streamlining, but helping get through the process better. Because I understand, I'm
talking about faster.
Well, yes, faster. Maybe it's staff level versus the whole process. I mean, I think that's something they have to work out.
Yeah, if staff could have more,
I agree.
decision-making authority in certain conditions, it would be, it would be certainly beneficial to one property that we know.
Life safety is like the ultimate thing we have to think about. And so, I mean, I agree if there's a way that staff can be involved quicker to get these things rectified. I mean, I completely agree to add that to that process. Because that's different than a new structure, a remodel, or whatever. I mean, that whole process is completely different, so.
UDO administrator relief valve. Everybody agrees. I don't know.
Again, the whole point is the preservation plan is on a staff level. So, we have the opportunity to go out there, we do the assessment, we come up, reach out to the applicant, or not the applicant, but the owner, and get them in and start going through that process. So it's not waiting 30 days to bring it in front of the Historic Preservation Commission. It is working with staff to come up with that plan, for that. Now, if there's an emergency situation for emergency stabilization and someone wanted to stabilize something, they can do that. They don't necessarily need a certificate of appropriateness to stabilize a building. Now, if they are looking to make renovations to it, then yes, of course, that's a different story. But, for the purpose of we need to, install stabilizing whatever from a construction standpoint to keep this roof up. Like, you can do that with the intent of we're going to come back in and make the necessary changes to it.
Yeah, because I was actually talking to Richard Spruce the other day about that building, and he was just, we were talking about historic preservation and different things, and he had said, well, they came and, it's falling down, so I was like, of course you can put some 2x4s up to make sure, like, of course, we're going to try and help you be able to stabilize that.
But I mean, that particular building, what it really needs is, for the rotten wood that's in the roof to come out, which means you got to take part of the roof off and reframe it and put, a good waterproof roof on it. Pretty easy to do, basically replace exactly what's there. But that's more than just stabilizing.
But at that point, is that more, like, if he's just redoing the roof, maybe Katie can answer, is that more of a site feature application? So you could do that, and that's quicker than going through any of the HPC stuff, because that's a staff level site feature. Because you're not changing you're not making a gable roof, you're putting it right back to what it was. So those are the quicker. If
I could, great conversation. However, for public hearing purposes on the UDO text amendment, I just want to make sure that you guys are focused. And I'm not trying to stop the conversation. We can easily continue the conversation afterwards for that. But just from a focusing standpoint, that we're not focused specifically on the red dot, but rather the code that addresses all of the contributing structures in the historic district. So.
You've heard everything I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is there any
I didn't mean to cut you off there, Joe.
Is there any other public comments? Okay, so public notice is closed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So then, I've lost my agenda. Is there any other discussion? Or do we have to do
No.
our recommendation?
Well, you still need to vote for a recommendation.
It's just a recommendation, not a vote.
Well, you're voting to recommend approve
recommend.
with conditions,
Okay.
or recommend denial.
Okay.
And then the next step was that this would go to town council for a first reading.
Okay. So can I get a motion for recommendation?
Sorry. I move to approve amendments to the Town of Bluffton Code of Ordinances, Chapter 23, Unified Development Ordinance, Article 3, Application Process to establish Section 3.26, Proactive Preservation and Maintenance of Contributing Structure.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I love that you asked.
Anybody else? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So now, do we have any other discussion?
At this point, no, there's no other items for discussion.
Okay, awesome. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right. I think we're all in agreement on it. Thanks, everybody. Sorry we went off on a tangent.
Great, thank you.